Right then, guys, inevitable really, wasn't it? I'm in the mood for predicting things. And other than predicting that Nicholas Jackson will be an absolute beast next season, stick around, subscribe to the channel to find out more about that very soon. But it's too soon to predict the Premier League. So instead, I looked down slightly and lo and behold, there was the Championship. So I thought, you know what? Go on then. But first, a disclaimer. I'm neither a Championship expert nor a psychic. So if I get one wrong or if I offend you, then I'm not sorry. Get yourself together and comment down below instead why I'm wrong and let me know what your predictions are down below. Who do you think is going to win the league? What ones do I get wrong? But anyway, grab a snack, grab a drink, or don't. I don't really care. It's up to you whether you eat or drink during this video because I do think it's going to be a long one. Let's begin. 24th, and I mean, it's never really nice placing a team at the bottom of the league. For me, there are certain elements that a club has to meet or has to have a good enough standard in to put in a solid season in an EFL league. And for me, Derby falls short on a few of these areas. The squad, for one, isn't overly appealing when you look at their players on their list. And now I say that in a sense that I don't look at their squad and see anyone that I think is a real difference maker. I don't see someone in that squad that really stands out to me, looks like a game changer. I'm like, blimey, he's going to light the season up. They don't have anyone like that. I think they desperately need another goalkeeper, probably at least another attacker as well. But one advantage that they do have is the club is big enough to attract decent quality players. I mean, when you think of Derby, they are an ex-Premier League side. They are a big name club. They do have the ability to have quite a strong pool. There are some players that I think might be attracted to the Derby project purely because it's Derby. For Paul Warne, I think he has a lot on his hands. He has a lot to do to keep his side up. But personally, he is the first manager on this list that I think will be sacked by the end of the season. I think he's the first manager out of many that I'm going to mention that are going to finish the season not at the club that they began it with. Does that make sense? I think so. You know what I mean. Right, moving up one spot. Oxford United. There's a lot I like about Oxford. But funny enough, this prediction is based on the facts, not on who I like the most. There's a few bias exceptions in this video, so just ignore them, please. Let my point stand. But good old Des Buckingham. He has a bit of a challenge on his hands with what I'd argue is probably his biggest coaching test yet. I mean, he's done all right in some other leagues, I think out in Australia and India, I believe. But I personally think the Championship is a step above where he's ever managed before. And after it took him a bit of time to adjust to League One, with, truth be told, a rather injury-hit side, they did do well to earn promotion. But for me, this squad is a below-average squad for most sides that get promoted. When you look at the players that they actually have, I don't think that squad is as strong as most squads that normally get promoted to the Championship, if that makes sense. Now, having said that, there are some players that I do like. I really like the signing of Plaqueta and Sibley as well. I think they're both really good signings. They both offer a level of experience at this kind of league, and they could combine pretty nicely down that left-hand side. I do like them as additions to that squad. Now, part of me is actually surprised that I managed to get this next team as high as I have managed to get them. But in 22nd spot, I have Blackburn. Many favour them to finish bottom, and depending on a few circumstances, I could be tempted to agree with them people. John Eustace, I think is a brilliant manager. I do really like him. I think he is more than capable of delivering. But the main issue I have with him is how will he be able to cope with what's going on behind the scenes. It just doesn't look that good at all. It looks a bit of a disaster going on behind or the back rooms of the club. I don't like it. And while nothing is confirmed, it does look likely that Sami Smodic is going to be leaving the club. He's been linked with a move to Ipswich, I believe. And I do think that could be a huge difference between them staying up and relegation. If they keep him, my opinion will be swayed. But if they lose him, that will be a massive loss. The Irish striker finished as, I think he finished as a league top scorer last season. And fun fact, he contributed to 51% of all of Blackburn's goals last season, which is a massive loss. If you lose him, granted they probably need the money, but if you lose him, I don't see a way that they're going to replace that. He got them out of some very difficult situations. So filling that void with pretty much no money it looks like an impossible task that I think could cost Blackburn. Now in 21st, I have Watford. And this just goes to show how bizarre the English pyramid is. I mean, a couple seasons ago, we were all watching Ben Foster's vlogs of Watford in the Premier League, and now I think they could be in a battle for survival in the Championship. It just goes to prove how being at a decent level in the Premier League does not necessarily mean that as you go down into the Championship, you're immediately going to go straight back up. The Championship is such a difficult, top quality league. I think the Championship, the quality there is probably better than some top European leagues. That's how good I think it is. But they've got some key players that have departed. I mean, you look at the likes of Ismail Kone, who's gone to Marseille, Wesley Hurt, whatever his name is, and potentially midfielder Asprilla as well. And despite I think they'll get good income for them, they might then end up having too much reliance on Cheick Fatadze in the midfield, who, to be fair to him, had a brilliant Euros campaign with Georgia. But I don't know if that's going to be enough. There's too much reliance on one player. They needed a few more signings for me. Cleverly as well becomes the 14th different manager to lead Watford out on their first game of the season in 14 seasons. That's a mental statistic to me. And obviously they have signed Moussa Sissoko as well. But for me, that feels more of a nostalgic signing rather than someone that's going to really revitalise that squad. I like it. I think he's a good player. I don't like it enough, though, for it to be a difference-making signing. Let's go on to 20th position. And don't tell Pieface, I've gone with Plymouth Argyle. As last season went on, I think we did begin to see cracks in this squad. They began to emerge as the season went on. And the leadership as well, I'm not entirely convinced that it's been fixed over the summer. And for example, what I mean by that is their manager was sat on the sofa in Germany, and he even struggled at being good at that. That is the level we're talking about here. Now, I do like the squad. I think Ibrahim Sissoko could be a good addition. They've obviously got a lot riding on what happens to Morgan Whittaker. For me, this could go two ways. I think if they keep him, they have done a brilliant job holding on to him while Rooney embeds his philosophy. Although, spoiler alert, I do think he's another one of these managers that are not going to finish the season at the club that they started at. But I think they could have made a great job of this summer by keeping Morgan Whittaker, especially if he does manage to get the same form that he had last season, proving himself at this level. However, I think if they do end up selling him before the start of the season, for me, that could be a massive mistake because they can command a huge fee for him. For the size of the club, they could get a lot of money. And personally, I think if they were intent on selling him and getting that money in, they should have done it at the start of the transfer window where they then could have got the new players in, spend that money wisely, potentially on a few positions, so that they had the entire pre-season. They could have had a lot more time to embed themselves in the club. And also, if they do sell Whittaker, whoever they then go and look to replace him with, that club is then going to know that Plymouth have got a load of money and are also desperate. So they can command a much higher fee than what they might have done at the start of the summer when they then had loads of time to find their replacement. So I do think that a lot is riding on that Morgan Whittaker situation. But for now, I'm not seeing enough to be convinced that he will leave. But I think they'll be safe though. I think they'll avoid relegation come the end of the season. Now the next one might surprise you, or maybe it won't, I don't know. But I'm not pottering around with my decision here. See what I did there? I've gone with Stoke in 19th. And despite a relatively good looking squad, the club did struggle a bit last season, and whilst I know I've got them 19th, I'm actually a little bit optimistic. This isn't like a 19th is a bad result for Stoke. I'm going to try and dig myself out of this hole, I promise. I think 19th is worst case scenario for Stoke, but I think they might suffer a little bit with their style of football. The 4-2-3-1 system that they play combines both youth and experience, so it might take a bit of time for all of that to come together, but I don't think that is any concern either. Progress is expected at this club, and I think based on the signings they've made, a lot of the fans and the higher-ups would expect progress, but for me, I see progress at Stoke coming in the style of play. I think they'd actually be better off finishing 19th, but committing to a really enticing style of play whilst they're going through this transitional period. I wouldn't be surprised if it did pay off sooner rather than later. If this ended up actually working out for them, then fair enough. But I think it's going to take this season for them all to come together and to gel. But at the end of the day, they could finish top half. It really depends. I'm not entirely sure by Stoke. Could go really well, could go really bad. We'll have to wait and see. Right, we're on a trip to Wales now, and any guesses who my 18th club will be? I mean, it's a 50-50, isn't it, really? But I've gone with Swansea. And I see Swansea a bit like Southampton, but the Southampton from Wish. I mean, it does kind of make sense that they've got manager Luke Williams, who I believe did work with Russell Martin before. Not sure if he's Buddhist, though. Maybe he should become Buddhist so we can get a bit of manifestation going on. But anyway, there's much to like about the Swans squad, with Franco and Ji-sung adding some dynamism. And obviously, they've got a bald manager, and we know bald managers always are insane. Anyway, regardless, I think this, a bit like Stoke, feels like a transitional campaign. I think they need some transfers out to open up some space for then additions to increase the squad depth. And I'm not entirely convinced by some of the players in the style of play. I think like Kabongo at centre-back, whilst he's got a lot of experience, I'm not sure his style of play exactly fits what Luke Williams is trying to get this squad to do. But still, I do think they've got a bright future. I like where they're going. Right, 17th. I've gone with Portsmouth, which wouldn't be a bad place to finish considering how long they've been down in the likes of League 1 and 2. But it's been a deserved return to the English second division, primarily led by the special one, John Mousinho. I mean, it just sounds like a shit Jose Mourinho, really, doesn't it? Or anyway, his influence and aura is certainly at the same kind of level. Relative. They play a style of football that isn't actually far off of the style of football that we see at the Premier League. And I don't mean that they're going to end up getting promoted, but they play in a 3-2-5 shape in transition, which is effective and enjoyable to watch. And the addition of Farrell as well, I think in that defensive role, will certainly help them tighten up that back line a little bit more with the positions that he can take up. And if Colby Bishop does get the same form and can transfer his form from the League 1 to the Championship pretty comfortably, then goals are certainly not going to be a problem either. I do think they need a couple of more signings to come through the door soonish, but potentially that could be some loans. So I don't think it's anything urgent, but I just think they do need a little bit more going on there. But I do think they'll be fine. Right, moving up again, I've gone with Millwall to finish 16th. There we go, I've said it. I first had them down to finish 19th, but I made a pretty late decision to swap them with Stoke. And it might be a decision I regret 9 months down the line. But at the moment, I think they've had a pretty decent transfer window. I mean, Tanganga and Bryan as defensive options, I think they've filled a problem that they had. But the most interesting signing for me is obviously Macaulay Langstaff. I mean, the numbers he was putting up at Notts County, both at non-league and in League 2 last season at Notts County, were sensational. There's no denying that. But that was in a relatively free-flowing side that was definitely a team better than where they were. They were dominating in them leagues. They were a side that would deserve to be higher than where they were. And granted, Notts County didn't actually finish the season great last season. They didn't struggle in the goals department, really, with Langstaff kind of pulling enough strings to keep them looking pretty good. The difference is I'm not entirely convinced by Millwall because it depends on whether he's going to get the goals. I think Langstaff really looked good, but that's because he was getting so many chances at Notts County that he was able to almost juice up his numbers a little bit. Whether he's going to get them same opportunities at Millwall or whether he's going to have to create for himself a bit more, I wouldn't be surprised. So it could be a bit of a hit or miss transfer. My biggest downfall for Millwall is I'm not entirely sure about Neil Harris either. He's shown he can steady the ship, but is he the one to take it further? I don't know. Okay, 15th. James Lawrence-Walcott might be happy, might be sad, depends. It's QPR. There's some players in the squad that I am a big fan of. When you look at the likes of Clark Salter, Reggie Cannon, Anderson, I mean, they've got the experience in Steve Cook and Jack Colback, and I really like Elias Chair as well. But what worries me most is where are the goals going to come from? Cifuentes' side last season sat 21st in the league for expected goals. And I think they spent more time prioritising quality of attacks over quantity, which is great, but I don't see Dykes, Frey and Chella. Are they going to be able to step up and improve their contributions? I'm not personally convinced, and for that reason I have them 15th. But that, to be fair, would be an improvement on last season's 18th, so who knows? Who knows? That's the point of predictions though, really, isn't it? We don't know. All right then, 14th. We're going back to Wales. this time to Cardiff, funny enough. I like Cardiff, and I like their squad. I think they're a side that are able to use their history a bit like Derby. They've got a big name in the scene that they can attract big players that other championship clubs might not be able to do. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think the signing of Callum Chambers and Anwar El Ghazi are necessarily groundbreaking, but they are a step forward in increasing the overall team quality, increasing a bit of experience in that squad. And I mean, obviously the likes of Horvath is a brilliant option in goal. Perry Ng is one of the best, or NG, I've never learned how to say it. Is one of the better right backs in the league. Sawyers and Ramsey in the midfield have experience, and Ruben Colwill does also look like a great talent, and Chris Willock was definitely a good signing for them. I do think they also kind of fit the style of play that they are trying to play. I think Ramsey with that freedom to go forward is really good to see. These are opportunistic signings though. They obviously have been made on a free with Chambers and El Ghazi. But the fact that they've made them on a free transfer is still pretty good. I think what they offer is definitely above championship level quality. I'm not entirely sure it's all going to come together perfectly. Will it match their style of play? Yes, to an extent. Will it become groundbreaking? I'm not entirely convinced. But again, it's one of them where it could go either way. So 14th for Cardiff. And then the final team in the bottom half of the table, and for me, it's Bristol City. What I love about Bristol City is the foundations that Liam Manning has at his disposal in that squad. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have any major standout superstars. There's no one that I look at and think, God, that's a brilliant player for that club. But I think it has a spine, it has a core that know how to work as a unit in that 3-4-3 or 5-2-3 formation, whatever you want to call it. I think that Sinclair Armstrong is also a great counter-attacking addition. I'll be honest, I don't feel like there's much to praise about Bristol City this summer going into next season, but I also couldn't find anything to criticise them on. So for me, they are mid-table. And creeping into the top half, in 12th position, I have Hull. Now, I do feel like last season's momentum and the new manager could be good enough to all come together, and it could be enough to give Hull a decent season, but it could also go disastrously wrong. Sacking Liam Rosenior was a very bizarre choice. Just because he didn't make the playoffs, I think what we saw there was brilliant. And I understand not making the playoffs when they probably should have done was a loss, but I don't think Liam Rosenior was the entire problem. Sacking him was a mistake. Is Tim Walter going to be the ideal replacement? I don't actually know much about him, to be honest. I don't know what kind of style of play he uses. So this is one that I am going to have to keep my eye on and see what happens. But the likes of Delap, Carvalho, Philogene, who have all gone, I don't think they're replaceable players. And there are now a lot of pieces of this squad that the German is going to have to pick up. As I said, if it doesn't work, this could go pretty problematic for them. But at the moment in time, I think they've got enough going, enough momentum. The squad is still good enough to get themselves into the top half. 11th place now, and I've gone with Preston North End, which is one place lower than what they finished last season, but I'm a massive fan of what Preston and Lowe are doing. I'm not entirely sure if last season's finish was enough evidence to go by, but it's what I've gone off of. So, but last season I've started really well for them. I think they raked up points pretty early on, and they got themselves into a safety zone where then it didn't matter that they started losing a few games because they were in a position where they weren't really going to push for the playoffs, but they also were safe of relegation. So their results, not that they didn't matter, but they weren't as crucial. And I really like the signing of Greenwood as well in that striker position. I think he can add a lot of intensity in the pressing movements. And also he's a good finisher. He can finish a lot of good chances as well. So for me, I think they will show a stylistic improvement from last season. But whether they'll be able to do that whole thing of raking up the points again early on, I'm not sure. I think it'll be tougher for them this season, but I also think they have more to deal with it. 10th spot now, and it's a team that I think have arguably the highest potential in the league. It's Sunderland. And I know some people have actually predicted Sunderland to win the league. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did manage to get promotion, but for me, they're just not quite there yet. Finishing last season 16th after a lot of managerial turbulence. It was poor, but now they've got Labrie, who, to be honest, again, I've not really heard of him. But I think they will show enough signs of improvement. And once he gets this squad going, oh, they will be going. Trust me. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, I think they lack a bit of expertise in the such that in the trickier games, I don't know who's going to be the one to step up and grind out that result. But what I do really like is, for me, they've almost won the transfer window for managing to retain their top qualities. I mean, keeping Joe Bellingham at the club, along with Alchiche and Pierre Ekwa, along with arguably the best two wingers in the league in Patrick Roberts and Jack Clark, it means they've managed to keep a lot of talent on their books who all have good connections with each other on the pitch as well. So they could still link up nicely again next season. And whilst they had the 5th best defence last year, going forward, they only average 1.1 goals a game, which isn't great. Let me tell you, in the Championship, that's not ideal. So if they can get that number up, then I'm pretty confident for Sunderland. Now, 9th position, and we're getting to the teams that are starting to just miss out on the playoffs. They've put their effort in, and they're not quite getting there. But for me, I've gone with Sheffield Wednesday. And to be honest, I actually wanted to put them higher. Genuinely, I really like them. I wanted to put them a bit higher. I don't know if last season's showed them in the best finishing spot, but the form that they were on towards the end of the season was certainly playoff kind of form. I think when that squad did get going, they proved what a side they actually could be and how much of a danger to the other to their oppositions they could be as well. I also think Danny Röhl could be one of the best managers in the league. I love him a lot, and what he's doing at that club is pretty sensational. They have, I think he's also recently signed a new contract, and by having this summer to bring in the players that he actually wants, I don't see any reason why they're going to go backwards this season. They've made quite a few signings, bordering on the it's too many signings kind of area, grey area, that one. But they might need time to kind of embed themselves in the club, to gel with the other players. They do have a lot of qualities in a lot of areas on the pitch, and I'm excited to see what with a full pre-season and then a full season under the German coach will actually look like. He is, for me, on the opposite list of managers that are going to get sacked this season. He is one that I'd almost bank on definitely being at Sheffield Wednesday by the end of the season. I think he's committed to this club. I hope he doesn't get sacked anyway. Famous last words? Okay, 8th spot. And it could be a new era for the new coach at Norwich. That was a lot of N's. New, Norwich. Yeah, anyway, Thorup has been brought in to replace David Wagner in a move that I think was definitely needed for both parties. I think the club needed to get rid of him, and I think it was in his best interest as well to kind of step away from all of that. And whilst they've made no mind-blowing signings, they have a squad that, regardless, is good enough to push for the playoffs anyway. They've got a good mix in experience with the likes of Duffy, Hanley, Fastnach, McLean, and Ashley Barnes as well, who's a brilliant striker. But they've also got a lot of talent in the squad, a lot of promising players with the likes of Borja Sainz, the pressing forward in Josh Sargent, and of course the Brazilian midfielder in Gabriel Sara, who I am a massive fan of. Having said that, I do believe he has just been linked to a move to Galatasaray or Fenerbahce, one of the two, in a £20 million move. If that goes through, I think that's a massive loss for Norwich, but it shows how good he is, the quality that he has. But going back to Josh Sargent, I mean, the American ranked 3rd in the league last season for XG per 90, and also 2nd for goals per 90, 0.77, which was only bettered by Jamie Vardy. And he also finished the league with 16 goals, which is pretty impressive. And also, talking about Gabriel Sara, he finished the league as the league's 3rd best creator, creating 119 chances last season, which are incredible numbers. And that was also only 6 chances created behind Leif Davis in top spot. So I think they will lose a lot of creativity if he goes, but if he does stay, I think Norwich have got a real gem there. I like what they have. I'm intrigued to see how Thorup does for me. If they have enough of the assets to get them going, it's a weird squad. It's a squad that's full of players that know what they're doing, but I see a lot of profiles that could clash. Will the manager be able to keep that under control? I don't know. But hopefully he can make them click. 7th now, and it's the team that just miss out on the playoffs. I feel sorry for them, but I've gone with Sheffield United. I don't think the club are necessarily in the best spot. It's now pretty much the 2nd edition of the franchise of Chris Wilder pushes for promotion. I've created it. It's a franchise now. But I think he also epitomises the club perfectly. Previously, he has been their most successful manager in their history. It's a huge ask for the club to ask him to try and replicate that again. And I do think he'd certainly give it a good go. I wouldn't be surprised if he's another manager that also doesn't finish the season, but I don't necessarily see him being sacked. I think if he realises he's not doing a good enough job, he will step down. I think he's got that kind of dignity in himself that he would do that. Now, the club this summer has obviously lost Ollie McBurney, who's gone to Las Palmas out of everywhere. That is one of the most bizarre transfers I've seen, along with Che Adams to Torino. But I think whilst that looked like a big loss, they have signed Kiefer Moore in his place. And I do think that is a really good signing. I think that's a brilliant addition to their squad. I mean, he is goals, isn't he? I'm not saying he's necessarily a sensational striker. I'm not saying he's a top Premier League quality striker, but he is a goal scorer. And their midfield, however, is also really good. Arguably one of the best midfielders in the league. They've signed Callum O'Hare on a free, which means that we will see that ex-Coventry link-up of O'Hare and Gus Hamer in that midfield, which I am incredibly surprised they managed to keep the likes of Gus Hamer on their books. But also you then got Arblaster as well, who I do think looks like a real star. And this is a squad that looks like they have what it takes. But for me, when I look at the squads, I think there are 6 other squads that look better. So that's why they've finished 7th for me. Right, of them 6 squads that I think look better, in 6th, I have West Brom. And they are the first of my clubs to make the playoff. Corberan's side last season did really well making it to the playoffs. They did obviously fall short to Southampton, who did go on and win it, beating Leeds in the final. But I would argue that Carlos Corberan is also one of the best managers in the league. With a full transfer window as well this summer, I don't see them going downhill. A bit like Danny Roll at Sheffield Wednesday. It's another club where I think now that they've got a full pre-season and a full transfer window, they are only going to go forward. However, when I look at the squads, I just have a gut feeling that out of the top 6, West Brom's is the weakest. And I can't explain why. It is just a gut feeling. I think they'll be comfortably ahead of Sheffield United personally. So I don't think playoffs is even a question. They should definitely be in the playoffs. But with Yokshalu potentially leaving, replacing him with a relatively unknown Diakite, that midfield doesn't scream quality to me. And their backline as well, I do think still could use some improvement. So West Brom, for me, 6th place. Okay, 5th now. And depending on who you ask, this could be one of my weirdest decisions in this league, or in these predictions. Some would say that I'm pretty spot on. So I've gone with Coventry. And this is a prediction based on the squad having to play to a higher level than what they did last season. But I also have no doubt that they are able to do better than what they did last season. I mean, look at their FA Cup run that they went on. It certainly proved that squad doesn't lack any fighting spirit or any desire. I mean, the fact that they came behind from Man United in the semi-final of the FA Cup. I mean, this is a Championship side who didn't have the best season after recently losing the playoff final, nearly getting to an FA Cup final against Manchester City. That is quite a sensational achievement. And I'm a massive fan of the likes of Haji Wright. I think he's proven that he definitely has what it takes at this level. And alongside the new addition of Brandon Thomas Asante, who has done a brilliant job at West Brom, and Ellis too, I think that's a good attacking options. Ben Chief in the midfield too. Top talent. For me, if Torp can also get the quality a bit better than what he had last season, if he can just take it to another level in that creative midfield role, then I think that Coventry midfield is pretty impressive. There are no obvious pitfalls in the lineup. Their defence is really good. They have the opportunity to really push hard, go for the playoff once again. I wouldn't be surprised actually if they won the playoffs. You heard it here first. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not predicting them to, but I think they could. Right, 4th place, and say hello to Middlesbrough and Michael Carrick, as I think they're going to regain their spot towards the top of the table. I think they're going to do it. And I think what Carrick has done and is creating at Middlesbrough is fantastic. And I think the players like Vandenberg, Azaz as well, they've had the time to develop into the player that Carrick wants them to be. They've gained a bit more experience. They are a bit more versatile, and I think they're certainly good options for the side. And if Latte Lath can get back the same form that he's had and avoid injuries as well, there's no doubt that he can find goals. He can put the ball in the back of the net, which this squad is going to need. I think the signing of Morris as well from Columbus Crew, was a smart addition after the American side have been phenomenal under Wilfred Nancy recently, but I think he's a great option to shore up that midfield as well. So he will strengthen their defensive side of the pitch as well. So overall, I have high hopes for Borough. And no doubts, I think they will deliver as well. And finally, the final team to miss out on automatic promotion, but I do think they will probably go off through the playoffs. This is the team that I assume will go up through the playoffs, is arguably one of the best squads in the league, Burnley. And despite it looking likely that they're going to lose the absolute GOAT, the big man up top, Wout Weghorst going to Trabzonspor, they do have a side that I think is much better than what a lot of the Championship squads are. Obviously, that's quite obvious. And they've got a squad that's pretty similar to a side that could compete in the Premier League as well. But if I'm talking about how good their squad is, why have I got them third? I'll be honest, the squad is great, but clearly they didn't have enough what it took under Company last season. And I don't necessarily know if Scott Parker is going to be able to resolve that issue immediately. Assuming he takes a similar approach to when he got Fulham promoted and what he played at Bournemouth a few times, he did go with that 4-2-3-1. Obviously at Burnley, you're going to see a 4-2-3-1 with James Trafford in goal. I mean, you've got Esteve and Bayer as the centre-back options. Brownhill holding the midfield down alongside Sander Berge. And then you've got the likes of Odeber, Koleosho, Ramsey, Trezor, all as that attacking options. And Amdouni and Foster up top. I mean, they've got a sensational squad. There's no way that this squad doesn't score a lot of goals. And I don't see a reason why they should concede that many either. So I do think they've got enough there to have what it takes. I think they will be a fair distance above fourth place. I think first, second, and third will be close. I don't know why. I think it's Scott Parker that's just telling me that out of the remaining two teams, they have more stability than what Burnley have at the moment, and a stronger ethos, a stronger togetherness that Burnley currently lack, especially after losing Company. I don't know if that made any sense, but I've gone with it. We're going to roll with it. Going into second place, I've gone with Luton. I think they epitomise a strong ethos. I really, really love Rob Edwards. Now, be honest with me, we all probably had them to finish bottom of the league last season, almost rock bottom in 20th position. And whilst I wish they avoided the drop, they certainly proved that they had enough there to put up a fight, to certainly put up a bit of spirit to get results against tough games. I mean, that Arsenal game, I know they lost. Liverpool game as well, when they ended up drawing. They nearly beat them sides. They proved themselves. And assuming they keep the likes of Alfie Doughty and Adebayo, then I think they have done well. And for the most part, it's a similar squad to what they had last year. Obviously, they've lost Ross Barkley, who was a massive player for them last season. They have lost Sambi Lokonga as well, who's gone to Sevilla. But they have brought in Baptiste in that centre-back position. I think he's going to have a bit of a point to prove after not necessarily hitting the form that people expected him to at Brentford due to injuries. He's going to have a point to prove, but I certainly think he's a top-quality centre-back. Arguably a bottom Premier League side team, worthy. So being at Luton is pretty fitting. But assuming that Chong plays higher up the pitch, the only position that I think they could use a bit of an improvement in is a ball-carrying midfield. But that's replacing that Barkley position. That's the only thing that I think is really obviously lacking alongside Marvellous Nakamba. But I do hope we see them back in the Premier League very soon. I mean, I've got them to finish second, so obviously I hope that. But anyway, going in to last but not least, the champions of the Championship. I mean, you've probably figured it out anyway by process of elimination or logic. But my winners are Leeds. They finished last season on, I think it was something like 90 points, something like that. And the fact that they got that many points and didn't get promoted is almost scandalous. I mean, it does show that they were able to compete with the likes of Leicester and Ipswich all the way. Daniel Farker as well. Whilst I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of his style of play, and I think his in-game management isn't the best, I do think that what he has them doing is effective, it's dynamic, and they've got a squad that I'd argue is on par with a Premier League level side. I mean, Melia and Firpo are both great in the defensive roles. Rothwell is a great addition to play alongside Ampadu in the midfield. Also, both brilliant players for their positions, and their attacking options are just a joke. Rutter, Bamford, Nonto if he stays, Daniel James, Joel Pirro as well. All brilliant players, all able to get goals, all able to make a difference. Now, I have missed out on Somerville. It looks all but confirmed. Probably when you're watching this video, it's been confirmed that he's gone to West Ham, who unfortunately I do think was one of the, if not the best players in the league last season. He was sensational, so losing him is a bit of a huge loss, and obviously they lost Archie Gray as well. So I do think they've had some major areas that they've had to move forward. I think probably for financial reasons at the club. Hopefully they have a bit of money to spend still. I do think potentially another midfielder and another winger could be options that they need to look at to replace them two that have gone. I mean, Somerville was linked to Roma. That's how good of a player he actually was. So they're not going to get someone in that good, but they will be able to get someone in probably that can fill that void at least. And I think they also are able to spend well enough if they need to. They've definitely got decent scouts, decent recruitment, and their youth system is also very good. So there's certainly going to be options that they can promote players into them positions. But other than that, I don't see any area where Leeds look like they're a problem. And I think they are going to have good synergy. I think they're going to have that togetherness, that strong desire to make up for what happened last season and really, really push for that top spot. And I do think they'll do it. I think they'll manage it, personally. But what do you think? So there we have it. That is my predictions for the Championship for this season. If you disagree with any, then you are wrong. How does that make you feel? No, but seriously, if you do disagree with any of my predictions, let me know what your guys' predictions are down below. Let me know what you think I got wrong and why. And if you think I did a decent job today, then make sure you hit that like button. Click subscribe. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, hopefully by the end of this year. And stick around to see my Premier League predictions pretty soon. Probably next week at some point. But in the meantime, go and take a look at this bizarre manager that I think you should watch next season. Go take a look. But until next time, I'll see you all very soon. Thanks for watching.